We're going to move to kind of a more visual part of the evening, and that includes two local artists from the cooperative, or LigoranoReese. And if you would like to come up, and we'll get you started up here. I'll just mention as you're coming up here that Nora Ligorano and Marshall Reese are local New York City collaborators and partners. They formed in the mid-1980s. They try to rethink traditional art forms by investigating the impact of technology on art with new materials and processes. So they're going to talk about some of their most recent work in fiber optic data tapestries.
So we want to, first of all, thank Pamela for inviting us to present at this wonderful conference. It's been really inspiring. We're thinking about things that we never thought about before. It's been a great opportunity. I'm a visual artist. I work with Marshall Reese. We collaborate. I'm a conceptual artist. I work with video as well as the fact that I started off as a painter. And I've moved through many different iterations of art making, including artist books, video installations, and sculpture. And for a day job, as all artists do have day jobs, I have spent some time as a textile designer and surface designer.
And I'm Marshall Reese. I started out as a writer and performance artist and moved into video art. And for over 2 decades, I've been working with Nora Ligorano, as Pamela mentioned, as LigoranoReese. We've always been in the vanguard of art making with the artist book movement, sound poetry, video installation art, live events, and political art. And we wanted to talk to you about a new series of works we've been doing for several years called the fiber optic, which we call the fiber optic data tapestries.
So we started doing the research and development for this work in the early 2000s. And after about 8 years of research and development of hardware and software and figuring out a way to etch the fiber optics so that it's reverse engineering so that we're actually destroying the fiber so the light can leak along the length of the fiber. We finally debuted a piece in a festival in San Jose called 01, which is a biennial of art and technology, and we did that in 2010.
Like the apple falling from the tree like the apple falling from the tree and hitting Isaac Newton on the head, or the dream of the Wright brothers' flight. In 2001, Nora had a dream.
And when I woke up from that dream, I said to Marshall, I just had the most fantastic dream. I just saw this fabric of light. So why don't we try and make a fiber optic video tapestry?
And my response was, great, what's that? And my nonchalance was not so strange, given what we've done over our collaboration. We've made some pretty out there stuff.
We've made video newspapers,
Video Bible belts,
video books,
video clocks,
and micro projection systems that have video images that are so small you can only see them with a magnifying glass. So it's an image projected on the head of a pin.
So when we started making the fiber optic data tapestries, the on-ramps for the information superhighway were just being built. And we were thinking about networking, sharing information, social interaction, and interested in making a connection with that activity and older cultural forms.
And we knew that we wanted to use fiber optic thread because it's a communication material. And we also knew that we wanted to connect it to weaving. We were looking at weaving as a significant human endeavor, beginning with the earliest human activities and touching almost all cultures from around the world. So our research is dedicated to exploring and connecting weaving with contemporary society through mathematics and computer science and digital electronics and art.
A major starting point for us was the Jacquard loom, as everyone's been talking throughout the conference, with its punch cards at the inception of the industrial age.
And also medieval tapestries that have narratives. They have a story on their surface. And in the 21st century, we find that our stories are threaded and networked through the web.
And we also looked at even earlier forms of weaving, the Incan quipus that are now thought of as accounting systems and an actual form of language in textiles.
And more recently, Magnolia Editions, which is in the Bay Area, has translated pixels to tapestry weave structures and reinvigorated the tapestry as a contemporary art form.
So we see ourselves as synthesis, and we're looking at a range of aesthetics and philosophies to meld into a single artwork. Among the inspirations leading us, some come from literature. The Bay Area poet Robert Duncan, on his poem On a Loom, Passage 2, was a very big inspiration for me many years ago, in which he writes, "My mind, a shuttle among set strings of the music, lets a weft of dream glow in the daytime, an increment of associations, luminous soft threads."
And the composer Morton Feldman, who is a founder of minimal music, or one of the founders of minimal music, studied design of Turkish rugs, which you see here, while creating music compositions.
And this led him to experiment with durational structures based on the intricacy of a rug's patterns, repetition, and ideas about scale and musical notes.
And of course, there's painting. This is Joseph Albers and the Homage to the Square. And so we looked specifically at Joseph Albers, who is a color theorist and painter, and also the painter Mark Rothko.
The fiber optic data tapestries would not be possible without these kinds of inspirations and without collaboration.
The weaver weaves the fiber optic tapestries on a Dobby loom, and the tolerance of the thread is very exacting. I think, as Patrice mentioned earlier, about weaving and tolerance and tension on the loom. So we found that out the very hard way, which was we were making our last tapestry, and the fiber optic thread had varied 1/1000th of an inch from the previous time that we were weaving. And while in industry, this doesn't make that much difference for carrying information along the length of the thread, it certainly messed up the tension in the loom. So it made it more complicated to actually realize.
One of the breakthroughs for us was not only teaming up with weavers, but also working with creative technologists on the hardware and software. Besides engineering, many of these guys are also musicians, and they make digital music instruments for performance. We found that this understanding of utility of the hand informs what we're making, the fiber optic tapestries, and gives them a warmth and physical sense and quality that other digital artworks may not have.
And in weaving the tapestries, the weaver's hand is visible. The shuttle, as it passes through the warp threads, abrades the fiber optics and the sheath of the fiber optics and allows the light to leak, as I mentioned earlier. So you always see the traces of the weaver's shuttle in all of these pieces, and each piece is very different.
The first fiber optic data tapestry is called 50 Different Minds, inspired by the Joseph and Annie Albers, pioneers in 20th century painting and weaving.
And Albers once said, if you say the color red to 50 different people, they'll have 50 different reds in mind. And so from that, we take the title 50 Different Minds. 50 Different Minds listens to words in Twitter feeds and paints them on the woven surface.
We associate particular color values for words in Twitter feeds. Crimson, blood, fire, and pink for red.
And for yellow, we're looking at lemon, gold, copper, and brass.
For blue, cyan, sky, ocean, and silver. And one of the ideas behind this was we were thinking about how color perception has changed with RGB color space, with projected light from a computer screen versus reflected light. 50 Different Minds also listens to data of arriving and departing flights from 9 of the busiest airports in the US, using the API of a popular flight stat service to create this design, which recalls Annie Alber's use of luminous geometric and line patterns.
And you can interact with the tapestry as well. You can, by writing a command in Twitter and using a hashtag and a color word, and it will respond. 50 Different Minds is very much about public information, and we have a little video to show you.
What we like about this piece is that it's about the weaver's hand. The shuttle moving through the warp and the weft on the loom abrades the threads and causes light to leak through it. If this thread were used in your home or office for networking, it would be totally useless, leaking data along its length. But for us, it lets us create beautiful patterns with light and colors. The fabric, then, is an artifact of the weaver's hand. In working with the weavers, we've experimented with different kinds of weave structures. And we invented a new kind of technology, one that takes into account traditional techniques combined with computer and LED technologies. We did a lot of experimentation to determine how far the light would travel through the fibers. Like traditional weaving, we are also concerned with thread counts to distribute the light evenly through the woven panels, using the right kind of colors and patterns that work best to dynamically display the data and information we are interested in. We used several different programs to configure the patterns. We finished the first piece in 2010, which we call 50 Different Minds. It consists of 9 panels with LEDs attached to both the warp and weft threads. It measures 50 by 50 inches. We think of it as a conversation between Joseph and Annie Albers. We looked at Joseph and Annie Albers for inspiration in thinking about color theory and weaving. The title is based on a statement Albers once made: if you said the word red to 50 different people, there will be 50 different reds. Much of our recent work is based on language and semantics. In 50 Different Minds, we are listening to Twitter tweets of words that suggest colors like silver, midnight, blue, and sky, and painting them in light on the fiber optic canvas. The piece is also informed by the frequency of words in Twitter, which affect randomizing functions. We also use flight arrivals and departures from 9 of the busiest airports in the US. We are painting with data.
The next tapestry we made, we decided to use personal information, and that brings us to IMI. The title is a quotation from Gertrude Stein's Identity of Play. I am I because my little dog knows me. Her inspiration for much of her early writing and for that play was about identity.
Today we have the quantified self, digital devices that are so prominent, and our involvement with them is absolute. We really wanted to investigate what a data portrait could be and what it would look like, what a portrait of measure would look like.
As data portraitists, our artistic tools track physical activities and one's emotions using a Fitbit, which I have on my wrist, that measures
Depth, distance, weight gain and weight loss,
and one's emotions. The IMI program sends an emotional survey to the sitter 3 times a day as an email SMS message with a link to respond to 11 questions about how they feel. Depending on their activities and responses, the program creates a real-time abstract representation of the sitter from their personal data on the woven surface.
The information is entered and controlled remotely on a computer, a tablet, or on a phone. And this is the emotional interface, as you can see on the phone. There is a sketch mode, which records the real-time activity, and final portrait mode, which is drawn from 2 to 4 weeks of collecting the data.
IMI is abstract, like a painting by Mark Rothko or Barnett Newman, instructional, like the work of Sol LeWitt, and it's interactive.
But it's also legible. We base the coloration on the Thai Khmer colors of the day. So in this example, Sunday is red, and going all the way to the end, that's Saturday.
And so you could, with this color scheme, you can identify what day of the week it is. And the colors also indicate the day the data was recorded. Activity data is primarily on the warp threads, and emotional data is on the weft threads. It has daily and weekly cycles, and emotional readings arranged as morning, noon, and evening data points. It goes to sleep at 1 a.m. and wakes up at 6 a.m. We'll show you what it looks like in this video.
As we look at some of our favorite portraits, we wonder how could we reimagine them in our time? Self-identity today is established not just by what we do, but by digital tools we use. With Fitbits, Jawbones, smartphone apps, and internet surveys like Track Your Happiness that record not just our activities, but also how we feel. Could we make a portrait of somebody using those kinds of devices and that kind of data?
What would a portrait of measure look like? In researching the history of portraiture, we learned that there's also a tradition of woven portraiture. So we made IMI, a woven data portrait.
It's woven on a hand loom and connected to RGB LEDs, which are programmed to display our sitters' activities. We spent many months developing IMI, creating pattern using light and color to visualize metrics, to show how many steps and miles I walked, how much weight I gained or lost, how active I've been, and it's continually drawing my portrait. We programmed it to even show what day it is.
In addition to tracking my activities, IMI asks me how I feel. It texts me and emails me to see how I'm doing. I tell IMI my feelings by using this interface we created. There are 11 emotions, and I can indicate how I feel by sliding this lever. It asks me this 3 times a day, morning, noon, evening, and displays the results. In the morning, my emotions fill the entire screen. At noon, they become a diptych. At night, they're a triptych composed of 3 emotional data points. During the sketch mode, we can see the portrait's progress daily. IMI displays my activities and feelings in real time. When the sitting session is over, after 2 or 4 weeks, I can commit my sketch into a portrait.
We program 5 different portrait styles based on noted artists that shuffle the sketch data into 5 specific routines. IMI is like the choreography for a dance in the way that it records the subject's activities. It's a new type of portrait that marries movement and emotions together using data as a dynamic portrait in time.
The newest piece that we're completing now is called The Certainty of Ambiguity. And the Tapestry makes patterns and colors generated from the input of a person's personal identification numbers.
It's freestanding and it's balancing on one of the tapestry's points. And it is, we think of it as a digital fingerprint.
So we're playing with the idea of fabric as an outer garment, a projection of oneself that enwraps and enfolds them, making visible what is usually hidden, private information, today the key to a person's identity.
The fiber optic data tapestries transport the earliest weaving traditions into the age of coding and parsing of information. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I want to simply say thank you to, first of all, to all of the organizers from the Center for Science and Society. And I would like to especially recognize Claire Sable, and I'd like to give her a big round of applause. If you could just stand up. she and the whole team, and you can see all of them listed there, have really worked with such devotion and dedication to this conference, and have made it really, really gratifying, I think, to all of the participants and to the audience as well. So I'd also like to recognize all of them: Melinda Miller, Joseph Sulik, Kirsten Dodson, Heba Seeger, Naomi Rosenkrantz, Carolyn Sermon, and Karuna Vikram. So thank you all very, very much. And then I'd also like to say thank you to the weavers, to our translator, to the session chairs, to all of the collaborators, the organizers, the speakers, the respondents, and you, the audience, as well as thank, of course, our supporters, our financial supporters. But I really would like to thank you all very, very much. I've learned so much that I feel like my mind is exploding, and I really need to have something to eat. So, and I'm sure that you all are, speaking of mind and body. So I'm sure you all are in the same position. So thank you all very, very much.